Today, we're going to be talking about the law. Welcome back to the Four Seasons. I'm your host, Ken Johnson, and it's been a while since we've actually had a chat. So I want to talk about the Lacey Act and the Pittman-Robertson Act because I've been doing a lot of kayak related DIYs. That's because even though for Florida, we really don't have a fishing season. We have fishing all year round, and there's hunting opportunities all year round. Really, it's paradise. What can I say? So, but for the rest of the world that, you're not blessed by God to live in Florida, um, you got problems. You have times that you can fish, times you can hunt. You don't have the resources that we have. Not saying you don't have great resources where you live, just different resources. And so this is a notoriously bad time. January to about March is a really bad time for YouTubers, especially fishing, hunting. It's really bad because it's just the way it works with the actual season and the legal seasons. It kind of makes it rough. So, as I said, I want to talk about the Lacey Act. I also want to talk about Pittman-Robertson Act, and what all this hinges upon is government overreach. And so what really spurred this with me is a number of YouTubers that have been doing questionable activities that could land them in serious trouble. And so first off, I want to preface everything by saying that I am not an attorney. I do not have any type of certification or any type of legal qualification where I can give a valid legal opinion. Instead, what I'm going to do is be addressing facts, and I'll be talking about political activism. And so my political speech is protected speech under the U.S. Constitution. And so that is what I am claiming here. If you have any questions about what I am saying, you doubt it, I urge you to research it out. Don't take my word for it. And if you have legal questions, you are advised at this point in time to seek legal counsel. But what really spurred this was that there was a number of YouTube videos that I've recently seen that troubled me because as a YouTuber, I really do kind of care for people that are in the field that I talk about. Remember, I talk about the 4 C's. One of those C's is conservation. And so there's some really good guys out there that have done some things that it really could get them in trouble. And I don't want to see that. I hate to see people that I consider to be innocent in jail. Because right now, America, we have 25% of the world's population think about it this way, 25% of the world's incarcerated population is in American prisons. So that really says something about what we think of our own people. YouTube, as onerous as it is, and how much it goes against China and how much it's really like China with its own policies. Same thing can be said for America. As much as we talk bad about China and hate China and everything, we incarcerate a large amount of our people. Too many people in America are being incarcerated that shouldn't be. And so I just kind of want to talk about this issue. So what spurred this? Well, The first one is a very popular YouTuber. He lives in Georgia, and he recently took down some videos, and he was called out on it by one of his colleagues. And he really didn't want to talk about it, and rightly so. He shouldn't have talked about it, but he did. And from what he said, he was, I won't say raided, he was visited by the Georgia Wildlife Authorities. And they were upset about a video they did. Uh, the backstory is that there was a pond that basically was forgotten. It was going in disarray. The guy thought that he had permission from the landowner to go and fish the pond, fix up the pond, all this stuff that was really admirable. He was trying his best to get these bass that were underfed, dying, and bring them back up. He was trying to fix the ecosystem, and he was trying his best. And he put out a lot of money into it. And one of the things he did was he bought crawfish off of Amazon and put crawfish into the pond. And that is what prompted the Georgia Wildlife Authorities to go pay him a visit. So, why did they visit him? Well, because in the state of Georgia, they have no history of crawfish in their rivers, lakes, and all that. I can't imagine that to be true, but they claim that is true. And according to him, that is what they told him. So I'm going to take it upon his word that that is true. He bought the crawfish out of the state of Tennessee. They were American crawfish, but they considered it releasing an invasive creature into Georgia waters. They quickly stopped the investigation when they found out that it was a pond in Alabama that he was going to. He bought the crawfish from Tennessee. They crossed state lines into Georgia. Then he willingly crossed state lines from Georgia to Alabama and then released them into an Alabama pond. Because that they deferred it to the Alabama authorities, we have not yet heard what's going to take place with Alabama. But what I'm going to talk about is what could take place with the federal government. You see, come to find out as the story unfolds that when he calls the person that he thinks is one of the property owners for the pond, as he said it, a number of residential properties butted up to this pond, and he thought he had access by talking to one of the people. What he did not realize was that their property did not butt up to the pond. They said, "This was not our pond. We just allowed you access to the pond. It is not ours to give you access, and you were trespassing." And sure enough, he actually did contact the true and rightful owner of the pond, who was not happy, of course, and other things ensued. Where I wanted to go with this, and where I think it's important to talk about, is the Lacey Act. Earlier in some of the previous episodes, I had talked about the lock-picking lawyer. He's another YouTuber. He's a real lawyer that lock-picks as a hobby. And so now he has a very successful YouTube channel where he picks locks. And he gave a speech about how the intent of something can be totally different than how it is being used. And he shows that with how he picks locks, and also as he does it with being a true lawyer, and how he navigates the laws and he goes past the intent and uses it in a different way. The federal government does the same thing. And this is true with the Lacey Act. So since Clinton, since President Clinton, we have had government overreach with every succeeding administration. And so it's been unabated. Trump did nothing. He was too worried about overseas stuff. It really ramped up with Obama. Again, Trump did nothing, so it continued all the way through, and now, we got Biden, and it's rabid now. And I can only expect it to get worse. And so you have federal government agents that their entire job every day is to go onto social media and find people that are breaking the law, which is crazy. These federal agents are supposed to be, these are wildlife agents. These are not like FBI, CIA. This is wildlife agents. You would think they would be in the woods finding poachers. The Lacey Act was created in the 1900s by Republicans to stop poachers. That is the whole intent of the Lacey Act. Then Reagan came along in the 80s, another Republican, and he tried to amend some plants and things of that nature. Then George W. Bush, another Republican, came along, and he added wood into the fix, and it was to stop illegal use of wood, illegal taking of plants, poaching, illegal transport, anything that was misusing a natural resource. That is what it's supposed to be about. And instead, the federal government, through the Pittman-Robertson Act funding, is going on social media every single day and looking for people like this YouTuber I was talking about, because if they find him and they realize that, one, he deleted out the video, well, that they could get him for, getting rid of evidence. And then the fact that he ordered something from one state, had it transported to another state, then went to another state, and that may be illegal. Yeah, that could lend him some serious trouble with the Lacey Act. And yet, what did he do wrong? They have crawfish in Alabama. He trespassed, but he didn't know he trespassed. He thought he had permission. So because he might have broken a state law inadvertently, but even the guy that owns property say he wasn't going to charge him, that still could get him in trouble with the Lacey Act. And when I say in trouble, I'm talking about years and years and years and years in prison. Then there was another guy. I want to say that he lives in Tennessee. And he has a channel where he goes and he mostly kayaks. And he made a trip to Florida. And there was like this federal area he was at. You could see the federal sign in the video. And he is catch and release. I'm totally against catch and release. I'm fillet and release myself, but to each their own. And if you want to catch and release, fine. The problem is he was down in an area of Florida where they have a lot of invasives. And Florida has strict laws that if you have an invasive species, you're not to release it back into the environment. There's a lot of YouTubers that they still do catch and release of these invasive species, even though they're not supposed to. Well, he did it in a federal area. Well, anytime you do something on a federal area, it automatically Lacey Act comes into play. When you go into another state, Lacey Act can go into play. And so he went into Tennessee, from Tennessee into Florida, with the intent of catching fish and releasing them back into the water. He caught an invasive species in that water and released it back. What harm did he do? That fish was already there. He released it back. Yeah, I would have killed it. I believe that invasive should be dead. But he released it. And because he released it in a federal water, nonetheless, he probably could get in trouble with Lacey Act. There was another guy. He was, I want to say that he was on a interstate bridge. Interstate bridges are funded by the federal government. So it is federal monies that goes to the state to manage that bridge, and technically it is federal property, even though it is state managed. He was fishing for sheephead, and he was using oysters. Well, in the state of Florida, you can use oysters for sheephead, but the thing is, oysters are a regulated shellfish. The state of Florida does not care about barnacles. So if he had took barnacles and used them, it would have been fine. But instead, he used oysters that were less than 3 inches across. If you catch or harvest an oyster that is less than 3 inches across, you are supposed to release it unharmed back into the wild. Only a certain percentage of the total harvest can be under 3 inches, and you cannot knowingly take oysters that are less than 3 inches. Most people use oyster rake, so therefore you would not knowingly, and you could argue I was using a rake, but he was actually hand picking them, so there's no argument there. So yes, he could conceivably be in violation of the Lacey Act. Every single year we have hunters and fishermen all across the US that are arrested by federal authorities because of the Lacey Act. And they're not poaching. They're not doing anything wrong per se, but it's a misappropriation of interpretation of the law. The most common way that people are arrested is because they use a guide service. Now you're like, Kim, guide services are legal. Well, yes, they are. But in some states, they require the guides to be registered with the state. And it is a special registration above and beyond a simple business license. So, what does that mean? If you go to another state, or even in your own state, but normally it's another state because interstate definitely makes the argument for Lacey Act. If you go to another state, you hire a guide, and that state requires that that guide be specially registered with the state in order to be a guide, and they don't do it. You, the person that hired them, can be arrested under the Lacey Act. Now, that makes no sense to me. Let's put this in terms that a Floridian would understand, because we have hurricanes. And so when hurricanes hit, you need a contractor. And that's when normally all the scam artists come out. So let's say that you hire somebody and they're not a licensed contractor. The state of Florida does not hold you accountable for the fact that you don't know how to look up a licensed contractor. Most people wouldn't. I mean, okay, so you got scammed, you're the victim, the law goes after the offender. Well, with federal game officers, it is a different matter. They expect you to know what the laws are on a state requiring some type of special registration for outfitters. So let's say an outfitter, a guide, he gives you insurance, he gives you his business license. None of that matters. You need to go to the actual agency, whatever that agency is, and trust me, it can be wonky some places. I mean, like in Florida, the agency that handles ballerina places and dance studios and also gyms is the Commissioner of Agriculture. Who would think Commissioner of Agriculture handles dance studios and mechanic shops and freaking gyms? It's stupid. All right. So you have this stupidity throughout all 50 states. And so you're supposed to try to figure out what agency it might be that would register and require registration for an outfitter. And you'd have to know that foreign state's laws on this. And then that person would have to provide you proof before you hired them so that you don't end up in jail by being conned. And a person could easily lie and give you fake data. I mean, good grief, look at all the stuff people are faking these days. So they could still fake it and you end up in jail. And we have all these cases, and it goes back, it don't even have to be hunting and fishing. In 2000, well, in 11 years ago, Gibson guitars got raided twice by the federal government because of the wood of their guitars. Gibson is probably the most liberal business in the music industry. They support Greenpeace. They are staunch Lacey Act supporters. And the first time they asked for an injunction because the federal government said, well, there's a coup going on in Madagascar and the wood you got is now under question. I mean, okay, you got a possible illegitimate government claiming that they're now legitimate, and you're now supposed to be responsible for wood that probably was hewn before that illegitimate government was created? Really? That is the stupidity of the federal government. They sought for a injunction for protection by the federal courts, and when they did that, the wildlife officers, they did another raid. And this time it was because of ebony wood, because in India there is a law that says that you cannot you cannot sell exported planks of ebony wood unless it's worked to a certain point, like veneer and things of that nature. So the federal government, they went a step further and said that the wood was not worked enough by the Indian laborers. And this was under Obama, said that it was not worked enough. And so therefore it was illegal. And even the legal experts over in India is going, that's not what our law says. And they didn't care. The federal courts didn't care one bit. And so poor Gibson gets raided again. And the federal government, when they was begging for mercy and asking, how can we get out of this? Federal government told them, said, well, just export all your guitar work over to India. So all those American jobs, they were trying to give over to India. And they were using the Lacey Act to do it. It's so comical, you would think it was fiction if it wasn't for a fact that it's verifiable. It's true facts. 21 years ago, some poor tourists, they were coming back from Honduras, and they had some lobster tails, and they declared them. They did everything that they were supposed to do. They got 8 years in prison. Why did they get 8 years in prison? Because the lobsters were in a plastic bag. Why? Because the Honduran government has a law on their books that says that you cannot transport lobsters or lobster parts in plastic. It has to be in cardboard. It's stupid. It's so stupid that they don't even enforce it in Honduras. Yet it was on the books. And because it's on the books, it's almost like the prime directive. You've got to do this. So the federal government says if it's a law, a local law, you've got to apply it to there. So they arrested these tourists that were coming back from Honduras and gave them 8 years in prison because they had their lobsters, their lobster tails that they declared legally and obtained legally in a plastic bag, which the Honduran government did not care one bit about. But yet, because it was on the books, the Lacey Act. So why did I bring all this up about Pittman-Robertson? What does that have to do with anything? Well, Pittman-Robertson Act is the funding source. So we now know the hammer that they used, Lacey Act. Well, the fuel is Pittman-Robertson. And Pittman-Robertson Act was really a good act. It is a tax sportsmen imposed upon ourselves to protect the wildlife that we truly love. And it has a wonderful heritage of bringing back wildlife. And it is a wonderful story until the federal government and the state governments, kind of like Georgia did, they get funded by Pittman-Robertson too. And so these state and federal agencies, they are using this funding source to go after the very taxpayers they're paying to fuel their activities. Instead of protecting the animals and plants like the laws say, instead of protecting the natural resources like the law says, they're going after the very people that fund them. And that's wrong. And so, what am I suggesting here? What am I getting at? Simply put, I think you should contact your congressman and senator and let them know that you want serious amendments to the Lacey Act, serious restrictions. It should not be where if you're truly innocent, you end up in jail just because there's a law in the book. I mean, yes, we should have safeguards, but they've taken it too far and it's gone unabated for too long. And by the same token, it should be noted that if serious reforms are not made, then the sportsmen of the U.S. government, or the U.S. people, not the government, but the people, because we are the ones that rule the government, are supposed to be, at least that's what the paperwork says, then we are going to lead a charge to repeal Pittman-Robertson. And we'll gut them. And we need to have that resolve to say, you know what? We will gut you. We'll take it away. And you may still arrest us for these stupid laws, but you'll have less resources. We will not be the ones funding you when you do this. So I know that's almost heresy in some circles, and a lot of people are not going to like what I have to say. So if you have a different option, if you have a different solution, if you have a different take, go down below, make a comment, let me know. I don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me. This country was built off people that we debated lively, and I am open for that. But we need to have a serious discussion. I've already made my views on this clear. Let me know your views. I think that if we don't stand together, we'll fall divided. That's all I have for today. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, hit that bell so you can get future content if you like this episode and what I've been putting out. And I thank every one of my supporters and all the ones that view these videos. From bottom of my heart, I do thank you. That's all I've got for today, and I will see you again next time. Bye.